Okay, right, welcome. Hopefully you can all see the screen of my computer, and I can see at the moment that there are 58 or 59 of you in the room. If you notice that on the right hand side there is actually a chat window, I'm just going to say hello, and that should hopefully appear on the screen. And so let's just come back here and just see if I can see all of you, anyone else who's in the chat window there. So I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes before we start because there's hopefully a few more people to attend. We had about 250 actually signed up to the webinar, so hopefully a few more minutes. So I'm just going to wait 1 or 2 minutes more before we actually start the webinar. I've got one of the Quizlet organizers with me at the moment as well, and I don't know if Meninda would like to just to say hello to everyone. Can you come on, Meninda?
Sure thing. Hi everyone. My name is Maninder. I'm on the Quizlet team. I work on the international team, and we've been growing a lot in Europe and in the UK especially. So we're really excited to be partnering with Russell to help bring more information about Quizlet and how to use it to more educators around the world.
Great. Meninda, just one little thing. Can the participants use the chat window? Is that available to them? Because I can't see anyone writing into the chat window at the moment, and I just wanted to make sure that we've got that set up correctly.
Yeah, the chat window should be, it's available to all the entire audience, so folks should be able to use it. And there's also a poll area, so if participants will go to their GoToWebinar control panel, which if they're using this from a computer, some folks might be dialing in from a phone. So if you're on a computer, you should have the GoToWebinar control panel, and from there you can you can ask questions via the question tab, or you can do chat. Oh, it looks like people are in the questions, and people are asking questions already. Maybe the chat is only for us then.
Right, okay. I'm not sure then if I can see that at the moment, unfortunately. I'm not sure where that is, Meninda, on my screen.
Okay. It's right above the chat. So if it chat, handouts, poll, there's questions. But folks are saying they can hear us. They're saying hello to everyone else.
That's lovely.
Yeah. So I think, Russell, we can go ahead and get started soon.
Okay. Okay, lovely. So let's get going. I'm not sure why I can't see the chat windows. Obviously, I normally use Adobe Connect, so this is a bit strange to me. But anyway, we'll get on with it, and hopefully, Meninda, you can highlight any questions that come up in the chat window. So this is a presentation about Quizlet. What I'm really trying to do today is to make sure that those people that have perhaps signed up and had a quick look at Quizlet or have used it a little bit, I'm going to hopefully raise your level and take you through Quizlet. And what I'm planning on doing basically is doing that at 3 stages. Okay, so the first stage will really be just to take you through the basics, but particularly focus on how your students are going to use Quizlet, because obviously they're the ones that are going to be using it and going to be studying it. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm then going to move on to looking at what happens if you sign up and have an account. Because you may not realize you can actually use Quizlet without even signing up, and I want to show you that first. But then we're going to look at how you can sign up, and then what that allows you to do, which it allows you to actually edit your sets of cards. It allows you to copy cards from another teacher, and I'll tell you why that's so important. And I'm going to show you again some little tricks that you can do when you edit your cards and produce your cards. Then I want to go on and have a quick look at the classes. In other words, when you get a bit more confident with Quizlet, one of the things that you can do is create a class. I'm going to show you how to create a class, and then how your students can find your class and join your class. Whenever I do the training in Quizlet, often people ask me that they're not quite sure how that works, so I'm going to highlight that. And then finally, I'm going to pass over to Meninda, because obviously in the last I'm thinking about probably in the last year, Quizlet introduced the live way of using Quizlet, and in fact I've not done this. And so I'm quite looking forward to Meninda taking over and showing us very quickly how to use Quizlet Live. We'll have time for questions. As I said, I'm not quite sure why the questions aren't coming up on my screen at the moment, so I'm just going to have to work that out as we go along. But let's start by looking at the basics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to Quizlet, and I just want to make absolutely clear to everyone, because sometimes when I do the training with groups around the world, I realize that people don't really understand that actually you don't even need to have an account to use the very basics of Quizlet. If I was to go on to search and just search for anything, so let's imagine, for example, I want to learn telling the time in English. Okay, so I'm going to do a search at the top here. What I get immediately is masses and masses of cards that have been produced by teachers, and I can kind of scroll through and look at these cards and see if there are any cards that I'm interested in. So I've got all these different cards that are available. And so the first thing to know about when you work with Quizlet is don't reinvent the wheel. One of the biggest or time-saving things that you can do is to make use of cards that other teachers have used. And that's precisely the reason why when we work with Quizlet, the idea is that we're producing cards and making those public. So what you can do at any point is just simply click on a set of cards and then look at those cards and decide whether or not they are ones that are going to be useful to you. Okay, so in this case here, what I've got is an image and the time written. These cards look pretty good, and if I wanted to use those cards, then I could begin immediately to now make use of them and do the different activities that are here at the top of the screen. So remember, the first golden rule is you don't need to actually make your cards yourself. And in fact, I rarely make cards, to be honest. Most of the time what I do is and I'll show you in a minute, I copy cards from other teachers, edit them for myself and make use of them. So let's just start, as I said, with the basics. We can always click on the back button to come back and look at our search again and just double check that we're happy with the cards. You can look through, find the ones that you really want to use. For example, I like the look of these ones here, so it's always good to scroll through and see what's available. I can see this set of cards here, and then if I decide to myself, right, I want to start to work with these cards. Okay, so these ones, what I've got here is an image and the actual time. Okay, so let's imagine now that I want to start to work with these cards. Now I've got a whole series of activity types that I can do with that set of cards, and so if I was to click here, for example, then I would start to do the activities using the flashcards. Now, one of the things that again teachers sometimes don't realize, at the moment what we've got here is the time, and then of course I would say 4:45, and then I could check that, and then I could click through to the next one. The time is 7:15, and I can check that. But it's well worth knowing, and this is a really good tip for your students, to click on the options. For example, if you're using the translation, and I'll show you an example in a minute with the cards that I use for Polish, then sometimes you want to change your settings so that, for example, the audio's on in one language but not in another language, or you answer with the picture, or you answer with the words. So make sure you're really clear about the settings. It's really worth looking at those options. And let me just demonstrate by jumping to a set of my cards just why that's so important. And we'll come back to these cards in a minute, but just going to quickly take a set of my study cards that I'm currently, because I use Quizlet a lot at the moment for studying Polish. And if I came down to some of my cards that I've got here, and I, for example, went to this set here, this would be fine. And the same thing, I'm going to click on the flashcard. So I'm doing the first activity. The settings are really important to me when I'm working in two languages, because sometimes when I'm studying, I want to hear the word or see the word in English first and then try to guess, well, what's that word in Polish? But often when I'm starting, what I do is the other way around. So I'll go to the options and say, no, I want to answer with English, but I don't want to have the audio. Click here, I'm going to say I want the audio in Polish, but I don't want the audio in English on, and I'm going to choose normal. Now, why would I do that? Well, because this way I'm hearing the word first in Polish, in the language that I'm trying to learn, and then obviously that means it's a slightly easier exercise. I just have to simply think, well, what would that word be in English? And say, right, that word would be book. All right, great. Move on to the next one and carry on like that. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I really, it's a really good idea to know the settings and to understand how those settings work, because when you're advising your students how they can study with the cards, then obviously one really important thing is to make sure that they understand, especially if you're doing something with a translation, that you want to start perhaps with the Polish first, and obviously would depend on the language that you're learning. But it's always, obviously in my case at the moment, for example, it's much easier to hear the word in Polish and then guess what that translation is. Obviously the other way around is slightly more difficult. That is, I hear the word in English and then try to produce the word in Polish. So that's what I tend to do, is start with the Polish and think of the word in English, but then later I switch it round and I start with the word in English and try to produce the word in Polish. It's a really nice tip and it really does make a difference. So the first point I want to make then about using Quizlet is that you don't need to produce any cards at all. You can simply find a set of cards, you can share those cards with your students, or of course they can go onto Quizlet and simply look for cards and then they can do the activities. Now we've just had a quick look at flashcards. There are lots more cards available. We've got the option to actually do a writing activity, and just to quickly demo that. So the whole idea of Quizlet is really that you've got a set of cards, and this is what I really like. You've got a set of cards, and then you can build a whole series of activities around those cards. So in this particular one, I've got the word in English, and then I can click and write the equivalent word in Polish, and then see if I was wrong or right. Again, remember the options. Do you want the audio on? Do you want the audio off? Are you going to answer in Polish or are you going to answer in English? Obviously, that works really well when you're using Quizlet as a kind of tool for translating, which I do fairly often. So obviously, sometimes you're really just going to work with a picture and a word, but other times you're going to work with using it. Now, of course, I'm looking at language teaching, but of course that doesn't have to be the case. It could be cards on anything. It could be cards on science. It could be cards on history. It could be cards on all sorts of things. I'm looking at languages simply because that's really what I tend to train the teachers to use. Most of the time when I'm doing my training, I'm looking at using Quizlet in a language learning context, but you can use it in lots of other contexts as well. So coming back again to the cards at the top, we've got a writing activity, we've got a spell activity as well. The spell activity is really nice, and again, good idea here to put the audio on. Decide whether or not, again, you're going to answer with Polish or with English if it's a translation. And when you write the word, and if I just quickly did an example here, and then what it does is it actually will correct your spelling for you and tell you what the correct spelling is. So it's a really nice activity. I find this really useful to me when I'm working in Polish, because the spelling of the language is very unfamiliar to me, and so working with the spell tool is really, really useful. Clicking on the back button again, we've got a test. Now when you're doing the tests, and again, make use of the options, because when you click on the options, for example, you can do a specific test that maybe is only true or false. So you could set just to use true or false questions in your test. You've got lots of settings that you can work with when you're creating your test. So again, make sure that you look at the options and you're familiar with the options of the activity types. And all of this information I teach to my students, so that if they work on their own, they're familiar with all the possibilities in terms of the settings that they can set when they're working with Quizlet. Okay, click on the back button. So just have a quick look at the last couple of activities, and then I'll explain a little bit how you would share a set of cards that you find from a teacher. If you click on here, for example, on match, this activity is simply just a matching activity. Again, in this case, the way I'm using it at the moment, it would be me dragging the word, in my case, from English to Polish, but it could be, for example, the word and a picture, it could be a word and a definition, etc. And notice, for example, that in this particular case, it's like a competition. Again, you've got your options, so make sure you're aware of your options. I'm just going to click on the back button. So when you find a set of cards that you like, the most obvious thing to do if you're going to share them with your students and you want to give them a specific set of cards is to copy that link and then send that to your students. You might send it as an email, you might put it into Edmodo, you might put it into Moodle, however you're going to share the cards with your students. So the golden rule is at the beginning is you don't necessarily need to sign up to actually make use of the content on Quizlet. You can find sets of cards and suggest them to the students, and you can train your students to actually use Quizlet, and they can search for cards and study themselves. However, and this is the really important thing, remember, you are using the cards of another teacher. And therefore, if that teacher decides to delete those cards or to edit and change them, those cards therefore would not be available to you. So let's imagine, for example, I'm using a set of cards. I've gone on to Quizlet and I found a great set of cards about perhaps the time let me just go back and show you what I mean. So if I come back to here and I'll do a search. So let's say, again, let's just do telling the time. I'm just going to do a search and look for some interesting cards. We were looking at some earlier that looked quite interesting. I think we were using this one here. Well, this one's absolutely fine anyway. Let me just show you. Now, I could share this set of cards with my students and say to them, listen, this is a great set of cards. So I could click here. I could share those cards with my students and tell them to work through and do the different exercises related to those cards. That would be great. But the problem is these cards are not owned by me. In other words, another teacher has created them. In this particular case, it's MS Stoves. Now, if that person changed their cards or deleted their cards, then that link that I shared with my students wouldn't be available to me. So generally what I do is I sign up to Quizlet. I have a Quizlet account. That's my advice to you. It doesn't cost any money to do that. But what that means is you are not only able to make use of cards that are already on Quizlet, but you can copy sets of cards that other teachers have created, edit them, and then share them with your students. And the big difference then is, of course, those cards are yours. In other words, you're making a copy and saving them on your system. And that means those cards are yours. And that way you don't have to worry about if another teacher edits their cards, because you've made a copy. So this is what I generally do. I search on the internet for cards. I find cards I like. I make a copy of those cards so that I've got them in my account. I edit them to suit them for myself. And then obviously I share them with my students. Now I'm going to jump back very quickly to the presentation mode. And just really what I've done there is quickly go through the very basics of finding cards. And I just went through the activities and talked about the settings. Meninda, have I missed anything out important, or do you think that was okay for a quick intro?
That was great. Yeah, I think that was an excellent overview of all the different study modes and how to get started. And some of the questions that came up around content creation, one of the attendees asked if it's possible for students to create their own. And absolutely, students can go create their own materials. A very common usage is for teachers to say to students, hey, use Quizlet to create your own set for things you find challenging and revise specifically those things. And so that way the students have the autonomy as well. But to get started is often more helpful, as Russell described, for teachers to find or create relevant material and share that, because students sometimes have difficulty in figuring it out on their own.
Melinda, I think that's absolutely a really good point you've made there, and just want to reiterate that because I've done that myself as well. In other words, starting with myself, training my teachers to use, training my students to use Quizlet and get confident with it, and then actually get them to create their own sets of cards. And we're going to be coming to precisely that in a moment. All right, the point I wanted to make, the most important point I wanted to make though, was you can go to Quizlet and look for cards and make use of them straight away without even signing up. But the problem, as I've said, would be that if you do that and the person or the teacher whose cards you're using decides to delete them or change them, then unfortunately those cards won't be available to you anymore. So you've got to keep that in mind, and that's why it's a really good idea to sign up to Quizlet. Meninda, shall I move on to part 2?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, right. So obviously it's a good idea to sign up to Quizlet. When you sign up to Quizlet, Quizlet is a free tool. There is a paid tool. Perhaps Meninda would talk a little bit about that at the end, because in fact, despite the fact I've been using Quizlet for many years, I actually just run a free account when I'm working with Quizlet. The interesting thing for me is that I use Quizlet in my own studies as well as using it with my students. So I'm kind of a user of Quizlet as well as using it as a teacher. What I want to point out to you now, let's just go back again to the screen that I was just looking at before. And we can again go back and do an example first. So I am logged in, and that is obviously really important. I'm just going to click back onto the home page, and I'm going to take you through the process that I would do. And it would work from both points of view. In other words, me working as a teacher or me working as a student. Okay, let me just take you through the process. Let's imagine that I decided I want to learn food in Polish. Okay, so I'm looking at this actually really from a student's point of view, from a learning point of view, but it would be exactly the same from a teacher's point of view. As I said, the point I want to make and I want to emphasize is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to look at the various sets of cards, and I'm looking at these cards here, and this looks great. I've got a set of 33 cards in Polish with the picture and the word in Polish and the word in English. Now, one thing that people often say to me is, Russell, yes, but you've got to be careful because you copy someone else's cards and there might be a mistake. And that is true. You do obviously need to do that. And occasionally it has happened to me that there has been a mistake. But overall, I must say, especially if you find a particular teacher who you notice is making really good cards, then my overall experience is that generally the quality of the cards and the cards that people have made are pretty accurate, and you can always go in and edit and check the cards anyway. So I'm going to click on these cards as an example. Okay, and these cards here have been made by somebody else, so these cards currently are not my cards. And if I decided to start studying these cards now, and I can look down here and I can see that there are 33 components. And another little tip sometimes, if I'm not going to actually copy these cards, is that I might say, right, I'm going to just learn the first 5 words, and I might do that. So I just click here, and instead of actually studying all 33 words, I might just start with the 5, then I click here, so I'm only working with the 5 words that I like, and then start to do my exercises. Okay, that's just another tip that you can use. Now let's just come back to the point I'm trying to make, which is a really important point, and that is that if you find a set of cards that you like, the most important thing that you need to do with those cards, let me just come up to the top of the screen a minute, the most important thing that you need to do is to copy them. So when you find a set of cards that you like, copy them. So I'm going to click on the copy button. Once you copy your cards, you need to give them your own title. So I'm going to call this Polish Food Russell cards. So these are now my cards. Okay, and I'm now going to click on the create button, and I've made my own copy of those cards. Now it's completely different now. If I shared this link with my students, there's no worry now of these cards being lost because these cards are now in my account. Okay, but just closing that window down, if we come down to these cards that I've produced, it may be that some of these cards I want to change them. Maybe, for example, 33 cards might be too many. I might want to add a few words. There might be words that I already know in Polish, so therefore I don't want to study them, or I know that my students already know. So one of the things that I can do is, once I've copied the cards, and this is what I tend to do, copy the cards first, click on the edit button, and that now gives me the opportunity to begin to edit the words. Now, there may be words, for example, that I know, or I don't want to, for example, this first word, chleb, I already know this in Polish, so I'm going to delete that because it's really not going to be any use to me. And I might scroll down a bit further and say to myself, right, the word sol, I also know that word as well. So I'm going to delete that word. I might just sort of click through, and what I'm basically doing, I might even come in and edit some of the words and say, well, look, this one's with a capital and this one isn't, and I'm going to make it all consistent. And this is what I'll do. I'll actually come in and edit the set of cards just to make them right for me. Okay, so again, the emphasis I'm putting here is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You can make use of cards that are already available to you, copy them, edit them, and then work with them. So I'm obviously coming through here now, just going to check again a couple of other words that I already know, a couple of words that are already very similar in my own language, so they're not going to be so difficult to learn anyway. And this looks pretty good. I know that word there, so I'm going to delete that one. So this is is exactly what I would do, and I would suggest you did exactly the same if you were going to be working with your students, and you would choose a set of cards, etc. Now, if I just come to the bottom here, it may be that you also want to add your own card. Okay, so let's say, for example, I clicked here. I could, if I want to, obviously you need to think of the word first in Polish, but I can add a word and then click to get the definition of that word. Okay, so I can at this point, if I want to, with a set of cards, produce add to them as well. Okay, I'm going to come back to that anyway in a minute, so I'll leave that for now, because I'm going to come back and specifically look at that feature of adding cards and creating a set from scratch, for example. Once I finish, I click on done. So now those cards are mine. Those are my cards. I've taken a set of cards from another teacher, I've edited them, and I've got them now to share. If I shared these cards with my students, then and that link, they will have the edited set of cards that I've made available that I've now just created. And if I was to click over here on the right hand side and come to my study sets, I will notice that it should show me the recent activity, that there they are. Those are my cards, and obviously I have now got those in my study sets. Maninda, anything that we want to point out at this point? Because what I'm going to do now is just explain to them how to create a set from scratch. But would you generally say that that's a good idea, not to reinvent the wheel? What's your advice?
Absolutely, because like Russell said, you can save a lot of time. And what's interesting to think about is that for any given subject, for any given grade level, there is a lot of overlap between materials. So for a very specific example, we can take the periodic table of elements. That's universal in chemistry. There's no need for a teacher to recreate their own set around that. If you just search for the periodic table of elements, there's going to be a number of sets relevant to that subject, and specifically on that material. So you can easily repurpose existing material. And there were some questions around specifically the accuracy of the material. That's a great point, because there's this availability for anyone to create material. There's the obvious question of, like, how do we know this material is accurate and reliable? So like Russell said, it's important to always check any material you find to see if it's relevant, and check it for rightness. But another thing that we do on our end is we rely on the wisdom of the crowd a bit to determine which material is good and which material is not. So we automatically elevate the relevant and most engaged with material in our search results. So it's a bit of relying on the wisdom of the crowd, and trusting that folks are judging accurately on what material is relevant and accurate versus not. But of course, it goes without saying that it's important to double check for yourself for the relevancy of the material for you and your students' needs, and also the accuracy of it. Which is you can do pretty quickly by taking a glance at the sets. Another question around copying was on if it's appropriate to be copying the material. From our perspective, this material all belongs to the content creators themselves, and so people can choose to make it not publicly available should they want to protect the material for themselves, but the default is to publicly share it. And this is pretty obvious in how people use Quizlet. So usually when someone creates a set and they make it publicly available, they don't have qualms with sharing it publicly. Now, a student or an educator might choose to keep their material private for their own purposes, and they're totally able to do that in the options of creating a set. But beyond that, I think you covered just about everything else, Russell.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important point to make, though. You know, the whole idea of this is this idea of not reinventing the wheel, this whole idea of open resources. So, you know, just all you're doing is creating a set of vocabulary cards, and it's a lovely idea to share those cards and make them available for other teachers to use, and they're doing the same likewise. You always have the choice to make your cards private if you want to do that, but really the whole kind of ethos of these things, and I was very much involved in the early movement around open educational resources, is the whole idea of, you know, not forcing teachers to reinvent the wheel, and to help each other and to support each other in our teaching and learning. And that's one of the reasons why I really like Quizlet, because it does offer that feature. That ability to share content for me is absolutely vital. Anyway, let's just move on then to the next point I want to make, and that is, what about if you want to create your own cards? Well, you just click on the button above there, and I'm going to give you a couple of little tips here. And to do this, what I'm going to call this, let's just do, for example, we're going to do transport in Polish. Now, apologizing for those people that are perhaps teaching biology or chemistry or you know, any other area, history, etc. I've even used Quizlet a little bit for some of my studies in history as well, where I once had the date and then something that happened on that day. So you can use these cards. When you get confident with them, you can actually start to use Quizlet very, very creatively. So I don't always just go for the common word plus definition or word plus translation. Sometimes I even do things where I've got the word in the present and the word in the past, and do activities like that. So that's something else that with a little bit of experience you can do. I'm just going to give you a couple of little tips here. Let's say in my case, obviously it's much more difficult for me to think of the word in Polish than it is in English. So if I'm going to build a new set of cards from scratch, which I rarely do, there are occasions when I do, and I'll talk about them a little while later. But if I do want to set cards from scratch, I'll often start by writing the word in. I can choose the language that I want to use here. So I can be telling Quizlet, right, I'm going to be writing English. And then when I come to here, I can choose the language, and now Quizlet is going to guess that I might be wanting to use Polish. It kind of sees the languages that I've been working with previously. So it's going to click there, and it's going to offer me straight away the Polish definition. And then if I clicked here, add auto define, it will actually offer me the word in Polish. Okay, and there it is. I've done my first set of cards. Now I could even add an image to go along with that. If I decided that I wanted to add an image to go alongside the word, I could actually do that as well. Okay, so let's come down to a second one, and the same thing again, particularly when you're working in a translation mode. Again, you need to sort of think about the different ways that you can work with this, but I would write the word in English. Now I don't need to tell it what language, it already knows what language it's going to be in. Click on, so not click on the different, click on auto define, and then click on the word that I want to use. Okay, obviously if I've got some familiarity with the language, then it's always going to help in terms of choices, because sometimes there's more than one choice. But this way of working is really, really powerful, and it allows me to build sets of cards really, really quickly. So let's just do one more example. So I'm going to click or write the word here. Okay, I've already defined it's going to be in English. I click here, it's going to give me the Jędrowka, which is the word in Polish, and I click on the word and I've got it. And again, if I wanted to, I can add a picture to go along with it as well. Okay, and sorry, the third one there as well. I'll just to make that clear. Now, I also write in saying, and Melinda, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I can't record my own voice, but it will allow me. That is basically only possible if I upgrade and pay for an account, but it will actually create a kind of automated voice of the words that I use. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So in terms of the audio feedback, which I'm sure Russell can show us in a second, we have what's called a TTS engine for about 18 languages, which is available for free. So this is, imagine like your Siri or your Alexa, kind of the robot voice in a number of different languages. And if you want to record your own voice, then that is a premium feature. But we find that for the most part, for the vast majority of our users, the TTS engine across all those languages seems to get the job done very well. And one other thing relatedly, as Russell's been showing the imagery, is the fact that a couple of people have asked about the royalties and the copyrights around this imagery. All the images that you can select to use here are in the public domain, so you don't have to worry about copyright or royalty fees or anything like that. If you want to upload your own custom images, say you want to have your own image of a bus that you have in your photos, you can choose to upload that, and then that is your own. But that is like the custom recorded audio. That's a paid feature. But again, the vast majority of our users don't need that, so they're able to use it for free. And like Russell has said, he's been using Quizlet for years, and he's been able to use it for free. We want to be very mindful of making Quizlet as accessible as possible, and so our paid and premium features are more around like power usage, which to be honest, not a lot of people need to use.
Yeah, as I said, I'm a great fan of this technology, and I train people in using Quizlet all over the world. And when I run training courses with teachers in various places, and then I use it, and I had lots of videos about using Quizlet on my website. But I think when I've really fallen in love with Quizlet, it was when I started using it in my own language learning, and then I started to realize, wow, this is just absolutely fabulous. And I will kind of talk a bit more about that in a minute, and when I do occasionally create my own cards, because there are moments. I won't create any more now. We'll just click on those cards because that should be enough. We've got a set of cards created. Transport in Polish. There's only 3 words. They've already got an automatic link here now, which I could obviously share with my students if I wanted to. Here are my cards, okay, on the screen. And the great thing is that now I've got those cards, I can start to do all the different exercises with the cards that I've created. And of course, these are my cards. So creating cards is a great is a very useful idea. When do I create cards the most? Well, in my own learning, and if we just come back to my sets of cards, as I said, I've kind of just been studying Polish for a little while. You'll see that one of the things that I do is I put the date, and then these are the words that I'm currently studying. So, for example, if I was to click here, these are the current words that I'm studying. Now, in this particular case, sometimes it's words that I keep forgetting, or it's words that I keep spelling wrong. So this is sometimes when I do create a set of cards from scratch. That is when I'm literally making a set of cards based on a series of words that I'm struggling to learn, or I'm struggling with the spelling of, or something like that. Then that's when I do create sets of cards from scratch. But let's say, for example, I'm in a particular chapter of my book on Polish, and that chapter was perhaps on furniture. Then one of the things that I would probably do is go to Quizlet, go to the search button, and click on furniture in Polish, find some sets of cards, edit them, and then obviously start to work with them. So it's a combination of occasionally me creating my own set of cards, but often it's me finding cards that have already been produced on Quizlet and then slightly adapting them as well. Just before we take a little break and move on to the next thing, just a couple of little things here. Obviously, on the left-hand side, we've got latest activity, and that will show you what you've been doing recently. And if you click on your study sets, and you're going to get a complete set of all the sets of cards that you've created. When you've got a set of cards that you've created, and if I click on those, obviously, if you created the cards and you want your students to work with them, then the key button for you is always going to be this share button, and that button will allow you to copy that link and then share it in Edmodo, or share it in an email, or share it in Blackboard or share it in Moodle, etc. That is one of the simplest ways of getting your students to access your content. Or even if you've got a group email for your students, or you've got their email addresses, or you're working in a private lesson or just got a few students, then you can simply write in their email addresses and send them. So that would be the quickest and easy, or quickest way certainly, to share the links to the content with your students. But there are much more interesting ways of doing that as well. There are a couple of other little features that I'll just show you just before we kind of move on to that third stage of creating classes, because creating a class and sharing sets of cards with your classes is perhaps one of the most interesting things. We've had look at a couple of these features here. Okay, this one here is a couple of things that are quite interesting. If you have a set of cards and students are working through those cards, if you click on this button here, you'll actually see, and we can see that nobody's done anything on these particular cards because I just created those. But if we jump back to another of my study sets, for example, I'm only pointing this feature out because often students are not aware of it. So if I just come down to perhaps a set of cards that I have been studying, which I think, for example, these cards, let's just come down here, because I know I was studying these cards. Let's have a look at these ones here, for example. I think I've was working through. If I click here, what I'll see then is scores, and it'll actually show me what activities I've done and what scores I've got on the various exercises. A lot of teachers don't realize you can do that. So as you create a set of cards and your students start to engage with those cards, you can actually go to the cards, click here, go to the scores, and see how your students are getting on, how many points they've got for the various exercises they've done, etc. Meninda, I'm going to ask you to come back in. Is there anything you want to add there? You know, I use Quizlet the way I use it. You're the expert, so you may know a couple of other things. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to show them how to create a class.
I think that was a great overview of that. Yes, as folks can see, there's a lot of flexibility with what you can do with the set. And there's a number of settings, and I think for the intents and purposes of a beginner, that's a very good overview. So I think we can move on to classes now.
Right, great. Okay, just going to emphasize one big point. You know, if you're really going to get a lot out of Quizlet, you need to become a little bit familiar with it yourself. You need to kind of work through and play around with it. But to really help your students, it's worth spending a little bit of time showing them Quizlet in the classroom and talking particularly about, when they've got a set of cards, these different exercises that they can do them. So it's really good idea to literally go through all these different exercises you can do. They're pretty standard, but remember the tip I gave you. Teach the students to make use of the settings. Whenever you look at the different activity types that you can do with Quizlet, make sure your students are aware of the settings that are available. Suddenly my web page is taking a long time to open. I don't know why that is. Let me just see if I can just re-fold that. I've got a super fast internet connection. That shouldn't be happening. Let's have a quick look if that's going to come back. Lovely. Okay, so always remember those options is absolutely vital. Right, let's move on to, we're kind of a bit short on time, and I just want to point out the last thing that's really important. If we come over to here, and I'm going to click on your study sets. In fact, I can do it from here. You'll notice that I've got classes. That is, I can create a class, get students to join my class, and then when students join my class, any study sets that I share with those students, they are available to them. So I've got here Russell's Quizlet class, for example, and I've created that. Now let me show you actually how you create a class first. And what I'm going to do very quickly, if it's possible, is see if I can get you to join this class for those of you that are already logged into Quizlet. To create a class is very simple. You just click on join or create a class. Okay, you click here and you've got two options. Are you searching for someone's class? So if I click here, okay, and it's going to start to show me the classes. So if I'm a student and I'm searching for my teacher's class, I can just begin to write in the name of the class and find it and then join, and then request to join the class. Okay, so if I'm a student and I say to my students, listen, I've created a class and it's called Russell Stannard's English Class Norwich, well, they can come on and they can search for it, and as soon as they start writing a word, the options will come. And then in this particular case, the students would click on that button because they would want to join my class. If you want to create a new class yourself, all you need to do is to choose this option here. So I'm just going to delete that away, and I'm going to click on create a new class, and I'm going to call this, for example, Russell Quizlet 2 class, and I can put a description related to my Quizlet presentation. So I'm actually creating a class here, and then all I would need to do now is click on create class. So you've created a class. Now obviously there are no study sets in that class next. Now what about when I want students to join my class? Well, I've got lots of options. First, I could send them this link, and if I send them this link, then students could copy that link, and then I think they can then request to join the class, and then I can accept them and they then join my class. So that's one possibility. Another possibility for a student then is for them to simply come in and click here, and they can then do a search for the class, as I just showed you a minute ago, but just trying to make it absolutely clear. Do a search, all the classes that are available will come up, and then they would click on that relevant class. I think I've got, if I just scroll down, let's have a quick look, see if I can actually see that class is the one that I've just created now. It should be there somewhere. I can see Russell's Quizlet class, they're the one that I created earlier, and you could choose there. So you've got various options in terms of the way that you get students to join your class. You can either tell them to search for your class by simply going on, clicking on join a class and doing a search for a class, or you can actually send them the link to that particular class. I'm just going to come back to the class that I was in there. Remember, I can just send that link to them. Okay, copy that link, send it to them, and then the students can join the class. And I'll see all the members by just clicking here, and I'll see who's in my particular class at that time. Now, what about when your group students join your class? Well, what can happen? Well, at the moment, if you join my class, and I'm going to share that link with you in a minute, there's nothing in there to study, but I can simply now click on add a study set, and any study sets that I want you to study, for example, I might say to you, right, this week I want you to study the Polish food. So you're all going to be learning Polish. I'm going to add these cards, and I might say, and also I want you to study furniture. So I can actually add the class sets that I want you to study. So this is the great thing about creating a class. It allows you to very quickly share cards with your students. All you need is for them to become members of your group. Now, I don't know if we could do a quick test on this. Would it be possible for me to be able to share that link? As I said, I'm having problems sharing, chatting to everyone, Melinda. Any tips on how I could share that with the whole group so that they could actually click in and join the group, join my class? Hello, hello. Melinda, are you there?
Yeah, could you hear me now?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I just wondered, is there anything I could do to share that link? I'm not quite sure where I could share it.
Yeah, for some reason the chat doesn't seem to be working right now, so I think we may have to skip on the joining the class.
Okay. Okay, perhaps we could anyway. So let me just to reiterate, and just to make that absolutely clear to everyone, if it's said, if we got a problem with the chat, when you create a class, so just to go through that again, when you create a class and you give your class a name, so this point is here if you're searching for a class. So this is normally going to be a student, because they want to search for your class, so they will come on here and do a search. You as a teacher, you may want to create a new class, so you're going to choose here. You're going to obviously give your class a name, so I'll do Russell Quizlet 3. Just want to make this really clear because this is quite important. And then click on create class, and then all you need to do is either tell the students to search for your class or give them that link and get them to join. And then of course what you can do is add your study sets, and the great thing about that is that you can do that every week. So you can create your new study set and then share that with your class, and create another study set and then share that with your class, and that way you know that your students always know exactly what they need to study. Melinda, was that okay as an intro?
Yeah, that's a great overview on classes. And to address a few questions that have been coming up in the question section, there's a question on if students need to join Quizlet to access the classes. They do not. Like the link that Russell was trying to share, you can just send that along, or as Russell showed, the students can find the class and they can view the materials of the class. And another related question is if students if students can have a link to a specific set, or if they need to join a class, they do not need to, sets don't need to exist in a class. Sets can exist by themselves. The usage of classes is an easy consolidation of a number of different sets, or to make it a one-stop shop for students to say, hey, I need to go to Russell Quizlet 3 to find the latest set, instead of having to send a link every time. Students know where to find the latest.
Yeah, I mean, they really help having classes. So you imagine you've got your class, you've got 20 students, you get your 20 students to join your class, and then every week you simply share the latest study set with your class, and your class students, they just join the class, they come into the class, and the study sets are there for them. They know exactly what they want to study. So, you know, that here is my Russell's TTV Polish class. See, all the study sets are all available. Okay, and that's the great thing, that once you join a class, all you do is come onto Quizlet, click on your class, and you'll see exactly what you need to study, because your teacher would have shared it with you. And that's one of the reasons why I like making use of classes, because it's just a really quick way of you sharing the learning content with your students, and they know exactly where to find it. They just come into Quizlet, click on their class, and all the content that they've meant to be studying is there immediately available for them. Okay, now I'm looking forward to this last part, because you're going to be taking over, and I will come back and just say a few things right at the end, but we're going to try and do a Quizlet live session. Is that the idea? Is that going to be possible, Meninda?
Yes, that's exactly right. So if you could, I'm going to be taking over presenting. So
sharing the screen, is that right?
That's right. And then you can just, if you can hand over the control to me. 1 second, I'm going to be taking control. Make presenter. So I am showing my screen now. And can folks see, Russell, can you see my screen all right now?
I can see your screen perfectly.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to be trying Quizlet Live now. For some context for folks, Quizlet Live is an in-classroom game which allows you to, so a lot of the study modes that Russell covered, they're great for individual studying, and they can be incorporated into a classroom activity as well. But Quizlet Live is unique in the sense that it's an activity the entire classroom can do together, and I think it becomes more obvious once you use it. So here's my Quizlet latest activity page. Say I'm a geography teacher and I want to go over European capitals. So I'm searching here for European capitals, and I'm looking through some of these sets, see one that I like. This one here seems to be pretty good. I can click into it. And here I can see the materials of the class as soon as it loads. So here's the teacher view, and what's interesting, this is something that when you have a teacher account, you can see this, is that you can see what terms students are doing well in and what terms they're struggling with. So here, this is very helpful data for teachers as they're creating subsequent lesson plans. But anyways, we want to go to Quizlet Live. So what I will be doing is I will be starting a session of live. So now this is where all of the attendees in the webinar can participate should they choose to. So I go click live as the study mode, and that's a study mode that's only available for teachers when you have a teacher account. And then I go to create game, and here I can choose if I want to do definition to term, or if I want to do term to definition. I say I want to do term to definition. So I create this game, and now this is where the fun starts. So we're going to try this live. If you're on a computer or if you have your mobile device handy, if you can go to Quizlet.live and enter that code, you will be able to enter my specific game. So I'll give everyone a few moments to go ahead and do that. So I'm doing it myself for my phone. I go to Quizlet.live. And then I just have to put in the code. So the code is 622822. Join game. I'll be asked to input my name. So I'm putting in my name right now, Maninder. and I'm in the game. And you can see on my screen, folks are starting to join. So Mike is in, Ailey is in, Ramiro is in, I'm in, Kelly, Phil, Renata, Wise Girl, Andy, Gary, Maria, Sheila, Russell, Nicolina, Jesse, and yeah, this is awesome to see people are joining. Let's give it maybe another minute as folks are either grabbing their devices and joining. So as people are joining the game, I'll explain a bit about some of the mechanics of Quizlet before we start. So what's great about Quizlet Live is that everyone gets in a classroom setting, everyone gets put into teams that are randomly assigned. If teachers wish, they can choose to also assign the teams if they want to, but it's often easier to just do a random assignment of teams, so that way students that might not be interacting with each other regularly join a team. And essentially it is competitive at the team level, and the way it works is we will all be grouped into teams, and everyone gets the same question at the same time, but the answer options are different for everybody. So on any given team, only one person will have the right answer to the question. So what this encourages is collaboration between the students. Well, what often happens with competitive games is that the students that know everything do very well, and the students that might not be as confident in the material feel left behind. So what Quizlet Live attempts to do is to build their communication skills, where students have to work collaboratively with each other, and the students that are confident in the material will work to help the students that might not be doing as well to understand the material as well. Because if a question is answered wrong, the points for the team fall to 0, and because the questions are spread out over different team members, everyone has to work together. So I think it's made a lot more evident once we start playing. So I'll give folks another 10 seconds to join if anyone is still trying to join, and we can go ahead and get started. And I think it'll become a lot more obvious once we get going. So we have a total of 41 attendees, and I will now a total of 42. And I'll go ahead and start this game. Create game with 42 students. Go ahead and click that button. Here's the option I mentioned about placing people at random. So I'm just going to assign random teams because we're distributed all over the world. So now you should see either on your computer or your device the team that you're assigned to. So here we have the different teams. I'm on the Mustangs, so Phil, Gabby, and Ellie will be working together, and you can see your teammates there. So I'm going to go ahead and start the game now. And one option here, if you're doing multiple rounds of this, it's possible to shuffle teams if you want to mix it up. So let's go ahead and start the game. And here is the scoreboard on my screen, but you will see on your screens questions. So you should have a question right now. Do you have the match for Belarus? The capital of Belarus. If you have it, you should select it. What is the capital? It's Minsk. So I have it from the Mustangs. So it looks like Gabby answered Belgrade. That was not correct. So if you answer it incorrectly, the scoreboard falls to 0. So you can see how this is a really fun game. So now I have the match for Belarus. It's Minsk, and I answer it correctly. The next question goes, do you have the match for Germany? I also have Germany, so I click Berlin. And so now it's the question is Serbia. So maybe one of my teammates might have Serbia because I don't have the capital of Serbia. Someone else on the Mustangs. Someone answered Reykjavik. Reykjavik is not the right answer. So you can see how this is a fun collaborative game across the classroom. And then if a team gets it wrong, the score drops to 0. So it's the question right now is Ireland. I answer Dublin. Do you have the match for Luxembourg? So someone on the Mustangs. Gabby answered Berlin. That's not the capital of Luxembourg. So our score will fall back to 0 now. And so on and so forth. So I think you guys get the point. Team Lynx is doing really well. They're ahead by 8 points. So Team Mustangs. Okay, the capital of Germany. I don't have that. So either Eiley, Phil, or Gabby will have to answer that. Perfect. Gabby got Berlin. And the game is over. So Veronica, Anita, Mike, and Janet won the game. Team Lynx, congratulations for winning. And here at the end of the game as a teacher, if you look at my screen of the scoreboard, we can look at the stats. And so it shows you what specifically what specific questions were confused. So then at the end of a session with the classroom, this is a very helpful review for everyone. So there's all the fun of Quizlet Live itself, And then at the end, the teachers can review with everyone what needs to be studied. So here it looks like the capital of Slovenia was oftenly confused with the capital of Slovakia. Very honest mistake. I probably made it myself. And I think folks get the point. Russell, do you think that was a good overview?
Yeah, that's very interesting actually, because I've never seen that in action. I know you've talked about it before. It took me a couple of minutes to work out what was going on the screen, because the interesting thing is that I can see the names of the other students in my team. Obviously, exactly. I can only see my options, but then I can, obviously, I'm only going to click on my correct one if it comes up. Otherwise, I'm really just waiting for my team members to answer the question. So I think, you know, that all that would need is a little bit of communicating with your students the first time they've done it. I can imagine the first time you do it, the students just for a little while, just needing a little while to pick up on that. But after that, I think that could be very, very effective way of working, very powerful.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. And I think what makes this a little bit difficult, I think it's still a fun way to do it distributed, but we're all over the world right now. I'm sitting here in California, Russell is in England. We have people from Estonia, Mexico, Argentina. So we can't communicate with each other right now. But in a classroom setting, the students are grouped together in teams. They can speak with each other on like capital of Belarus, what is it? And they can communicate with each other. And we really want to encourage that collaborative learning as one collective classroom. So we find that Quizlet Live is very effective for that. And it helps engage everyone from the top students to the students that are less confident. So it really is collaborative and developing those soft skills that are very, very important in addition to the specific material being learned. So yeah, that's Quizlet.
Just a question about Quizlet Live. Is anyone allowed to use it, or is that only a premium feature? Do you need to pay to have that feature, or is that available to all teachers?
Quizlet Live is freely available to all teachers, and right. It is exclusively for teachers. So you do need a teacher account to start a game of Quizlet Live. The reason for this is that we wanted to make sure that Quizlet Live remains a collaborative in-classroom game. So yeah, so long as you create an account with Quizlet that is a teacher account, which is free to create, you can play Quizlet Live for free with your classroom.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, really, really great tool.
Great. So I will exit the game here and end our session of Quizlet Live. And I think that's the end of the things we had planned. Anything else you think we should go over, Russell?
No, I was just going to say, if I could just come back, I was just going to make a point of where people could learn a little bit more about Quizlet on my website. I've got lots of videos about how to use Quizlet. I go through all of the features and I go through some advanced features. I wouldn't mind just quickly pointing out to people. I think most people will know anyway. Are you able to just pass the control back to me just for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. I will change presenters right now. Give me 1 second. Attendees, staff. One other great, in addition to Russell's work, there's a ton of stuff that Russell has done on Quizlet. I think phenomenal resource if you want to learn more about Quizlet. There's also, you can come to the Quizlet.com website and go to Quizlet.com/teachers, and there's a wealth of material there as well. So Russell, you should have control now as presenters, so you can just share your screen.
Lovely. Let me just quickly share my screen. I'm just going to make this point to, so hang on a minute, I've got show screen. So if I click on that button, so hopefully you can see my screen now.
That's right.
Lovely. Just really quickly for everyone, because it's all free. If you come to the website, you can sign up to a newsletter if you want to. That's on teachertrainingvideos.com. It just tells you of all the latest videos. All I do is I make videos that show teachers how to use technology, and I've got particularly one section here on Quizlet, and in that I've got some advanced features. I've got tips on making the cards, so if you want to learn to make Quizlet cards, then make use of that. I've got tips to tell your students, so this is what I was saying to you today, and these are all right up to date. They've all been made in the last 6 months, some in 2017, some in 2018. So tips for your students, and down here, we haven't covered this today because we decided that we weren't going to throw in too many things, but I have today released a new set of videos which looks at the diagram tool. Not long ago, I think about 3 or 4 months ago, Quizlet introduced a diagram tool, which is great for language learning because you can basically create or upload an image and then add hotspots onto it. So you can label a picture of a house or label a body or label a map. You could use it in all sorts of subject areas, if it was biology or in chemistry, or it could be used right across a whole spectrum of different subject matter. But obviously for people like myself who teach languages, it's very, very interesting. Once you've created your own labeled image, which you can then use for studying, Quizlet allows you to do a series of games around that particular diagram or labeled image that you create. So it's great. It's called the diagram tool. If you go to my website and watch those videos, they literally are uploaded today, and they really quickly show you how to use the diagram tool. And I really recommend that. We haven't covered that in today's session because we were just slightly worried about the amount of things that we were covering. Meninda knows I'm a huge fan of Quizlet, and it's these videos are very popular on my website.
Yes,
Meninda, that's not anything else that we want to add?
No, I would just second the notion of all the wealth of material that Russell has around Quizlet is truly great, and he's a phenomenal authority on not just Quizlet but on teaching technology and pedagogy. So would really encourage, if you're interested in engaging with that material, to learn more.
Good. Are there any kind of final questions that we need to deal with? Because the questions aren't coming up onto my screen. One thing just to make a point. Oh, actually, I think the questions are finally coming up onto my screen now. So that's
Why don't we run through some of these questions here? So there were a number of questions around live. So I'll just go through all of those. The option for live is available for free users. You just need to have a teacher account. A lot of times, so the way a teacher account is designated is when you sign up, we ask everyone who is over the age of 22 if they're a teacher, and so you just select that you're a teacher. If you don't have the live option showing up for you, that means that you don't have a teacher account. So simply just write into support@quizlet.com saying, hey, I'm a teacher, but I don't have a teacher account, and we will fix that for you. So then you will have access to live. Someone asked, how do I join? The join is, you join the Quizlet live game by going to quizlet.live and then inputting the code. So sorry if you missed it, but we've already wrapped up the Quizlet live game. And Jose asked about dummy players. Dummy players are essentially, we put in a computer. So the minimum requirement to play a game of Quizlet live is 4 students. And so say if you have a group of 3 and you still want to do Quizlet live, the dummy player will just put in a computer that plays alongside the human players. How to create a game for Quizlet Live? I'm not sure I understand that question. Essentially, you can take any set and use it for Quizlet Live. And Marion asked about frustrations for the smart students waiting for people who don't know the answer. This goes both ways. I think the smart students often enjoy being able to help their peers, and it's not necessarily I feel held back by this. And I think it ends up, it's interesting to see. I'd encourage you all to check out videos either on YouTube or check out stuff on social media of Quizlet live games. It ends up being a very collaborative endeavor, and there's no notion of animosity between students, like, oh, you didn't get the answer right. And Isabel asked, can we specify the questions asked in a live session? Yes, absolutely. It's just entirely dependent on the study set that you choose to study with. So yeah, those are all the questions regarding Quizlet Live. I think there are, someone asked about the recording. The recording will be sent out afterwards to all registrants. And there's a question around the pronunciation. Yes, that's something we're aware of. We're actively looking into updating the pronunciation of the TTS voices. Some languages it does very well. Other languages it does not so well in. We've been told that the Japanese pronunciation, the Polish pronunciation, and the German pronunciation is sometimes not as accurate as it could be. So we are working on updating that, and we appreciate that feedback. I think that's, Juan asked the advantages of a paying account. So we covered this before. We're very mindful of making sure Quizlet is freely accessible to as many people as possible. And in light of that, we make the vast majority of Quizlet free to use. The paid features are more focused on the power users that use Quizlet a lot. So there are features such as uploading a custom recording of your voice with the flashcards instead of using the robot voice. There is a feature on uploading custom images of your own that if you don't want to use the public domain images. For teachers, there is a benefit around creating diagrams with more terms. For free, the diagram limit, I think, is around 15 things in one diagram. And for teachers, there's also more in-depth analytics if they find that helpful. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of the paid accounts. But I really want to emphasize we are very committed to making Quizlet as accessible as possible, and we don't want to make it a product that is only useful if you can afford to pay for it. So because of that, the vast majority of our usage is free. More than 99% of Quizlet users use Quizlet for free. This is both students and teachers. So I think there's a lot of value to be had out of the free product. But should you wish to upgrade to help support our business and also get the premium features, we would be overjoyed by that. And with that, I think, go on.
Yeah. I just want to emphasize the point of, learning the basic tool well. I probably be training now about 35 to 36 countries around the world, and people come up to me and say, oh yeah, I know Quizlet already. I don't want to do that, if I introduce Quizlet into the training course. And then often at the end, the same people come up to me and say, oh Russell, I didn't realize it could do this. I didn't realize it could do that. I would really emphasize spending a bit of time sitting down, discovering all the activities that you can do, looking at all of the settings and thinking about what advice you can give to your students, because there's so much that you can do with the free package that even myself, and I'm sure that if I asked Maninder, he would even give me the upgraded package for free, probably. I haven't even asked for it because I simply don't need it. It really, it can, I'm sure it can be useful, but I would just emphasize that first of all, make sure you really understand what is available in the basic package.
That's great. And I think that's everything for all the attendees. So again, the recording will be sent out to the emails with which everyone registered. I just want to thank everyone for attending. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us and learn a bit more about Quizlet. And thank you, Russell, for helping out with this great webinar.
Yeah, that was good. It was great doing it with you. I really enjoyed that. And thanks for showing me how the live Quizlet Live works, because I didn't know that. And just to remind everyone, we will be sending you, or Maninder will be sending you a copy of the recording of the whole session.
That's right. And that's everything. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Lovely. Cheers, Maninder. Great to work with you. Thank you very much.
Yep. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.